Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners and welcome back to those who have heard my content in the past. If you want to know where sports PTs get stuck in their career, you have to tune into this episode. Uh, this episode. Before I go on to the podcast, what is new? What is better? First and foremost, my daughter just turned 5, and it was quite emotional. She got a new nail salon. Right now, she's all about having a nail salon inside her room and is painting her little brother's fingers probably every night. So that's been great. Zach is doing awesome. He's making books of drawings that he's doing. He staples them together, and he is going around the neighborhood and trying to sell them and distribute them. So always appreciative of that. My wife is doing awesome. For those of you who don't know, we've got the Murph workout this week. Whenever you're listening to this in 2023, so I am excited about that. First year, I'm going to go unpartitioned or non-partitioned, all in, all reps, and I'm trying to stay underneath an hour. So we'll see how that goes. I'm excited about that. All right, on to this podcast. What are we talking about and why? So somebody this is a good comment. I think some of us in our career have felt like this. Here's a question of the week. Here's what I got. When do you feel, this is by a sports PT, when do you feel that you're not drinking out of a fire hose when you're like treating, tough cases, new cases, you're a new grad or you've been in the business and industry for a long time, and when do you feel like you're not drowning anymore? When do you feel like you can come up for air and you actually feel like you got things under control? Whether that's, I mean, it could be in your clinical care. It could be that you are a new parent and you're trying to maximize clinical care. It could be that you're in a residency and you don't feel like you're being able to do anything because you're just drinking from a fire hose. You can't even like come up for air. Either way, at some point right now in your career, you're feeling like that, or you have felt like that, or you're gonna feel like that. I can promise you I go through this regularly, and I'm going to teach you the algorithm that I see in sports PTs. It's what I'm teaching. Those are on my mentorship courses, on my academy. It's all the same things, and I want to be able to share in different perspectives. So that was a question that stimulated the whole thing. And I can tell you, if you don't overcome this, if you don't conquer this, if you don't learn how to manage this, you too will have a hard time developing your career as a sports PT because you'll constantly feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, both personally and professionally, because they go so close together. Because in the clinic, you've got notes, you're crushing it, you're doing fantastic, but then you didn't organize things better, and you have this caseload of documentation. You come out back home and you bring it home, and your spouse, significant other, kids, they also want that same attention, and you just like, at home I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose, and at the clinic I think I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. I don't know how to organize my sessions. I still don't know strength and conditioning. I don't know how to write the program. My corrective exercises are crap. My documentations is crap. You just feel like that at every given time. And whether you've been practicing for 10 years, you go through waves of this because life happens to you, right? Something happens wrong in the clinic. The 5 no-shows, 10 cancels, and you're like, what is happening? Like, what did I do? All right. And you get these seasons. So I wanted to give you a little perspective on how to recenter, how to refresh, what it is that I use personally, and when I'm coaching all the physical therapists that I mentor, how to put yourself in a good position where you're not feeling like this. And if you are, strategies to make sure you come out strong, resilient, and you are prepared for the next event. And you know what, even better, you can kind of identify those things. So I wanted to share those things with you today, and that's ultimately the conversation that I had. When do you feel like you stop drinking from a fire hose as a professional, or when do you feel like you stop drowning inside sessions or your paperwork or inside your personal life? So that's what I want to share today, and I have a couple things coming off of this that are very, very critical. As some of you know, I've done a residency. I did it right out of PT school. It was a personal decision of mine. At the time, there was only 5 residencies in the country, and I wanted to be part of something big from the beginning. I could tell that this was going to be where the profession was going, and I felt like if this was going to be the thing that we're doing as a profession, I want to be part of it. I want to be like, I want to understand what we're doing because I want to help at a greater scale. And so I went through that, went through a residency. It was first exposure to, man, this is tough. I thought residency was tough, and or excuse me, PT school was tough. And for those of you who don't know, I did a part DPT PhD program, and I was like, man, I can handle coursework. I can handle like the investigation hours and all the side hours that I was doing with the PhD program. And then I went to residency, like, oh, I got clinical stuff and I got home stuff, and I'm working 70, 80 hours. It was a ton. And so as I went to professional sports, it was almost like I went to a decline in number of hours, mental space hours. And so during this whole process, now adding kids into my life and my company Sports Performance and having, I don't think we're at like 15 to 17 staff members now, and always feel like a drinking from a fire hose. So how do I, how do I ensure that I don't feel that way? And how do I know that I don't, how do I ensure that I don't let that make it into a snowball effect and make things worse and regroup and attack it with confidence? And I'll share that with you today. So I have a loop that I want you to think about. If you're watching on YouTube, you saw what I'm describing, but basically it's a feedback loop. Okay. So three simple words. Okay. Awarity. I just combined two words. Awareness leads to clarity, and clarity leads to action. Okay, let me say that again. Awareness leads to clarity, clarity leads to action. And anytime I am mentoring or a clinician has a case study or something, one of the first things I want to figure out is, are they aware, is the clinician aware of the main problem that they're missing? Because as a clinician, you're going through a hard case study, you know what to look for. You feel like you're overwhelmed. There's so many different ways you can go. Do I work on taping? Do I work on bracing? Do I work on strengthening? Do I work on manual skills? There's so many things you can pull from in your toolbox. Sometimes you don't know what to do. And so whenever you're going through that, if you don't have awareness of the right direction, it's very hard to make the right decision because you need awareness of the proper thing that brings you the clarity, and clarity that brings you the right action, all the things that you need to go into the right thing. And here's the critical part. Once you solve that case, you create action, you did the right thing, right? Now you have to have a feedback loop and reflect on that and have awareness like, okay, that's what I did at this moment. What would I have done? Great. And that leaves you clarity onto future actions. So it's this constant loop that I'm always looking at. And um, I'll write down, even for this podcast, I have things written down here, and I'll write down all the challenges that I'm having, and then what's the consequence? What's the thing that I want out of this? And so I have to write things down so I'm not lost, and that brings me awareness. Like, what are the top 5 things that I'm considering with this case study? What am I working on? What's this? Why is this knee pain not getting better? That brings me awareness of what's the plate of problems that I have. Then as I do that, I'll triage and look at, okay, well, if I choose these top 2, I have a risk that they're going to get injured again. If I do these bottom 2, it's going to make it worse, or it's going to delay their healing. And then I have to figure out, what am I okay with and what is that patient okay with? So now I'm kind of triaging now. Here are my 5 options on my awareness. I get it. I chose my top 2 things and the directions that they can go. Now I have to be comfortable with the consequence of that. Well, I think it's gonna take them a little longer than I would want. However, that's kind of where I want to go. Sounds good. At least you have clarity off of what you were considering. And now your action is based off what you feel comfortable with. So you have awareness, you have clarity, and you have action. Most of us become overwhelmed with awareness. And so we're like, forget it. We'll choose a path of least resistance. Let me go straight to action where there's no clarity. You just feel overwhelmed and like bombarded. And so you make decisions on the fly. Now, that might get you through certain stages. But if you're looking at from a professional development, this is where sports PTs go wrong. In their career, I've worked with a lot of sports PTs, successful in pro sports, clinic directors, private practice owners, in collegiate sports. And where I can tell you the ones who succeed and continue to succeed, while they might not use this analogy, they're really good at triaging these three things. Why? Because they're constantly introspective. They're constantly working on what it is their problems are. They don't skip the clarity portion because they want to know what is the right decision for me. You and I, early in our career, I'm guilty of it too. I was just trying to just figure out what I can do just to get by. But the problem becomes at some point, you have to be able to work through this because the consequence is you become complacent, you're average. And if you're listening to this podcast and you are a one motivated sports PT, average is not who you are. It's not where you want to be. And I can tell you because that's like the epitome of failure from my eyes for myself. If I am no longer caring about the people I serve, the people I do, that's like a relationship where you stop putting effort into. Then why are you in that relationship? For you, you're now working, what is it that I need to do? Because I feel like I can't fix low backs. I don't know what the problem is, right? So you don't even have an awareness of what the problem is. Well, no wonder why you can't get better at back pain. And ultimately, you have to understand this cycle. Let me just bring you that portion. And the best thing you can do, honestly, is write this down somewhere, whether that's on a Google Doc or a piece of paper, a sticky note, somewhere where you're going to see it, right? And just stare at this, right? Awareness leads to clarity. Clarity leads to action. So where are you stuck in the decision making that you're trying to, that you are all your challenging cases, where you're stuck in your career? Because if you can't work through that, you'll never grow. You'll never create the best action. And this is why sports PTs who've been doing this and have progressively grown 8, 12, 15, 20 years are constantly going through this loop, this cycle. But I can tell you this, where most sports PTs fail and where they drop within this cycle nowadays, because of the trend I'm seeing, 3 to 5 years. Burnout, they just stop and then they just become the mill PT who just runs through the exercise, who writes down the numbers, who documents, checks out, no growth, not doing stuff on personal time, no personal development, no more podcasts, no more books, no more CEU courses. They're either too good in their head or they just gave up. What was the path of least resistance? The action, quit, be complacent. And that's okay. That's completely fine in this world. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. But if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably trying to get out of that or stay away from it. That's really your two spectrums. So, all right, so that's the cycle, right? Let me put it in context of sports PTs early in their career, right? Here's the challenging part for sports PTs. You're trying to get good at manual skills for pain relief, right? You're like trying to figure out how much pressure I'm applying. Is it a static mobilization? Is it oscillatory? Is what it was sustained? Whatever you want to do. And then you get your focus so heavy on that, you become in love with it, right? You're the manual therapist of your clinic. And then you get somebody who is manual therapy averse, a patient who is averse to manual therapy. They don't like it. You're like, oh, you took away all my arsenal. Well, I'm just giving you exercises. Well, I haven't really focused on a lot of exercise. I've been so heavy dependent on my manual skills. So I'm going to throw you exercises, and those exercises flare them up. And you're like, gosh, I gotta get better at my exercise progression. So you go, so you go to exercise progression, and you're like, oh, I took all the courses. I've been watching all the YouTube things. I've gone on every Instagram account from the 50 influencers that I know, and these are the coolest exercises. And you get good, right? People are like, oh, exercise. And then you have people who are like, you flared them up because you threw too much of them, and you forgot to blend your manual therapy. So you blend a little bit of manual therapy with a little bit of exercise. You're like, oh, I figured it out. And finally, you get some athletes who have acute injuries, meaning fresh new injuries in the acute stage, proliferative stage. And you're like, well, It's worked for my manual therapy and my exercise. Let's go apply it to acute injuries. And you flare them up because it's the worst thing to do. You don't apply orthopedic principles to new injuries. Very different world, very different planet. You're like, what could I have done? Those are my two skill sets. You're like, oh, I could have added some taping. I could have added some bracing. I could have added modalities, even though I don't believe in them. We don't do all these things. But that's for, traditional orthopedic care in a chronic stage. Now you're working with fresh injuries. And you're like, oh, now I got to figure out what's the difference between chronic and acute. How do I treat them differently? Then you take courses, you take information on acute injuries. Like, oh, that feels finally better. I'm confident about injuries. And you're like, great. Now I can manage them. Now I can get them out of pain. Now I get them exercise. And then you have athletes who are like, hey, I just had an ACL. Is there a way that you can teach me how I can get stronger after I rehab this ACL? Actually, I don't really need the rehab anymore, but I would like maybe a strength program. Is there something you can do? Like my coach doesn't offer it. I don't have a personal trainer. Is there anything you can do? You're like, oh, I would love to. So here's a home exercise program that I built for you. Why don't you just add a couple more exercises, a couple more reps, add weight, and that's my strength program. And finally you realize that it really didn't do anything for them strength wise. All it did was just be like a really nice exercise program. So you finally get into the strength and conditioning. You're like, oh, I'm gonna take my CSCS. I'm gonna do all these things. My point to all this thing is this is a sequence of events that happens to sports PTs in different aspects, right? And while you might say, well, it was great. Now I worked on this. Now I worked on this. If you look at that, that's like 4 to 6 years of work to get efficient at all these categories. And even that, there's so much more. There's movement courses, there's McKenzie, there's Mulligan, there's all these various different types of things that you want to get better at. My point to this is that you're trying to move in a linear fashion. I'm going to get good at this, and I'm going to get good at this, I'm going to get good at this. And that's going to take you 12 years to get good at everything. Now, it's not possible to work in that fashion because it'll take you forever because you're going to treat so many different types of athletes in between. So the best way to work is simultaneous, right? So you're a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you're just constantly growing. Well, you always feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose because you're like, gosh, this patient needed back pain therapy, and I don't know, I'm not good at back pain. And this one needed, a little bit of hands-on shoulder work. I can definitely do that one. So throughout your day, you're like, oh, I don't know wrists. I can't treat that one very well. This one had a ankle sprain. I'm pretty good at those. And so you're just every day, every week, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so good at some things, but I'm not good at these other things. You're always drinking from that fire hose. And ultimately, you have this piece of life or your professional development where you're just trying to juggle all these tasks and development. It's overwhelming. And one, it's normal, right? This is just normal part of the process. But at a point, you become overloaded with trying to do all these tasks. It's just the natural part of the process. And so I can't answer you if you say, "Oh, Chris, what's the best sequence that you would do right out of PT school? What courses would you take from years 1 to 3, 5 to 10, 10 to 15? What would be the exact course?" And I can't tell you what you're good at. I don't know what your CIs were good at. I don't know what your school focused on. I don't know what the patient population is. And everybody's path is going to be dictated by those key features. Your CI, your experiences, your exposure, your clinical setting are all key to like what that stream of water would follow through. Not everybody has the same path as me, nor do you want that. Everybody's on a different path. So what I can tell you is what bumpers or what path would I give you, or what guidelines would I give you along your path? So either way, we're all going to be frustrated or overloaded with trying to manage simultaneous growth within all aspects. And I've said this before on my past podcast, sequential versus simultaneous growth. Sequential is I got to get good at manual, and then I'll get good at movement, and then I'll get good at acute care, and I want to work in a very linear fashion. It's very PT-esque. That's what got you through a 4.0 in undergrad and a valedictorian in high school, and you're a superstar in PT school. That's what got you there. But when you're in the professional world and you're trying to be a sports PT and you're trying to manage everything, sequential doesn't really work. It's going to take you forever. The OCD person of who you are won't work, and I can tell you because I've lived that life. At some point you have to figure out how do you work on all of the aspects and become 5-10% better versus trying to be 100% then move on to the next thing. So being overloaded with simultaneous work is real. The best thing you can do is look at this: awareness leads to clarity, clarity leads to action. Pick your 5 things that you're working on right now. For some of you, it's taping techniques. For some of you, it's exercise. For some of you, it's the sequence of your initial evaluation and the formatting and how you're going to reevaluate, or the shoulder exam. For some of you, it's manual therapy for the ankle. For some of you, it's strength and conditioning. List out the 5 things that you're going to try and do. That's the awareness, right? Like you don't really take this time to figure out, what are the 5 things am I working on right now? Because I feel like I'm working on 20. Great, pick your top 5. That's your awareness. At the end of this year, what would bring you the most bang for your buck based on the number of people that you see to develop your skills and improve your outcomes dramatically? So not the fun ankle sprains that you never see. What are the things that you know that would help you become a better sports PT right now out of the top 5? You just wrote those down. The outcome that you want at the end of the year is, I want to be better known as a sports PT, and I treat a lot of low back, a lot of youth athletes, and a lot of ACLs. Now, in order to get better at those 3 outcomes, and here's my current 5 things that I'm working on, what courses or what plan would you do to execute to make sure that your top 5 are triaged to have the outcome that you want, to work with your youth athletes, to work on your low back, and to work on your ACLs? That's the clarity part. You're so far inundated drinking from a fire hose that you've not sat down and figured out, what are the biggest priorities that you want, and then what's the outcome that you're trying to get as a sports PT. The clarity is so simple in between. But because you haven't sat down and created awareness, you've created no action. And that's where sports PTs get stuck. They feel inundated with simultaneous development, listening to 57 different podcasts, watching 57 different Instagrammers, watching 2,000 YouTube videos. They don't even know what the main problem is. They're just trying to get better at all of it when it's not possible. Pick your top 5, then figure out what you want at the end of the year. Then you just choose your courses and outline them based on the year. Awareness leads to clarity. Clarity leads to action. And where most sports PTs get stuck in their career, they're overwhelmed. They don't consider any of this. And then they just stop. They stop. They stop listening because they're like, oh, I'm so burnt out. I'm so tired. I'm so frustrated. It just, I don't seem to be getting better. The best sports PTs who continue to progress can take a step back, figure out what their priorities are, what is it they want to do, and create that clarity. It's the biggest struggle you'll have, especially in that 3 to 5 year mark. That's why most PTs get burnt out. They go straight to the mill style of treating, right? The number of exercises, same 12 to 15 reps, same 2 to 3 sets, same things over and over and over again. And it's just like they're living the same day 365 days a year. It's the same day. There's no growth. And they used to be very motivated, right? Right now, you can consider, you're like, oh man, that was my friend. That was my classmate. They were so hardcore gung ho. And it could have been the setting, it could have been themselves, it could have been life. And I can tell you how this goes into your personal life. You had a kid on top of all the chaos of the trying to grow simultaneously. Like, you've never triaged this. What are the things I need to prioritize? And you had a kid, you had a busy life, you had a new marriage, you had honeymoon, you had a new house, you had all this stuff, and there's no prioritization. What happens? Life takes over, and you're like, well, gosh, I just got married, I just got this home, I got all this stuff. So you prioritize life. And then what happens to your career? Just drops. Really good sports PTs can maintain those at a healthy balance and love every aspect of it and be happy and crush it. And this is where I am in life. I just constantly prioritizing managing people, developing people on my academy, developing people within my sports performance team and staff, constantly doing that, developing myself so I'm prepared and triaged, preparing and growing my marriage so that my wife and I can enjoy that together. Being a father and developing that awareness leads to clarity. Clarity leads to action, and you're just constantly doing this. And in order for you to be successful and develop as a sports PT, and you're going to have high pressure jobs as a sports PT. You might work in a high school, you might work in a college, you might work in pro sports, and if you don't fix this, it's only going to get worse, right? It's just this constant cycle. If you're like, well, I'll just think about it tomorrow. I'll just think about it. And I'll take that course next time. I'll do this. That day never comes, and you're just always in this constant someday syndrome. Someday I'm going to do it. Someday I'm going to get caught up. Someday my spouse is going to love me. Someday my kids are going to, I'll spend time with my kids. Someday I'm going to be in the clinic. Someday I'm going to get that dream job. And you find yourself doing this, you're just constantly in that rabbit hole. And the place where you're stuck is the awareness. Like you'll never create action until you can understand this. And that's where sports PTs truly get stuck. So awareness brings clarity, clarity links to action. You get overwhelmed trying to juggle sequential tasks, simultaneous tasks, get overloaded with simultaneous, and you feel like you're never good at one thing. And so you really need to take a pause and take a step back, because if not, you'll end up giving up or getting really bad at something. That's really I mean, you're just going to get bad. You have to drop something. And so one analogy I can tell you is I want you to think of all these things as uh, glass or rubber balls. So say, for instance, you're working on documentation. You're working on taping, you're working on manual therapy, you're working on a project, right? Maybe you're a clinical director and you're trying to create something new for your program. Documentation and create a new program. One of those is a glass ball and another one is a rubber ball. So if you drop the rubber ball, it's okay. It's going to keep bouncing. So you can kind of let that go. The other one is a glass ball. You let this drop, it's a big problem. Documentation over time is a glass ball. You kind of need to do that no matter who you are in your professional career. The program is kind of a rubber ball, depending on what your timeline is. Taping. How many people do you tape on a regular basis, and how many patients would you do that? Is that a rubber ball or glass ball? Manual therapy. Do you work in an exercise-based clinic where you don't use a lot of manual therapy? That could be a rubber ball. You'll be fine. If you were an exercise-based clinic and you're not good at exercise development is a glass ball. You need to do that. You can't drop that ball. And you're just constantly juggling these things and holding them. And you're like trying to figure out, are the progress notes the glass ball? Is the documentation a glass ball? Is the cleaning up my area? Is my notes? Is my home exercise program? Is my strength and conditioning program? What is the glass ball? What's the rubber ball? And you're just constantly doing that. And if you can do that, you have to take a step back. First part is the awareness. Awareness is I have a problem and a challenge. I can't juggle all these balls at the same time. And now you got to figure out and prioritize which one is not, and that figure out what the action is that you want to create after that. And the clarity is developing which one is, or identifying which one's a glass and which one's a rubber ball. And when you can do that, man, you are constantly juggling it, and you feel like when you can master this down. And I'm in a point in my career where I'm constantly evaluating things on a daily basis. What's glass? What's rubber? What am I doing? What needs to happen? Where can we go wrong? Where will that ball drop that will create a cascade of events that puts us in a really bad position? And that's on a daily basis. And if you're doing this, once a year, you're going to be in trouble. It's not going to help you because life changes too quickly. Your hours at work shifted. You're now nights instead of mornings. We're now work Saturdays. All these fluctuating things. You just have to do it on a regular basis. And honestly, it's a weekly thing. I do mine on Saturdays at 5 a.m. For those who follow me on Instagram, Chris Garcia DPT, I do a sauna session every single morning, 4:30 in the morning ish to 5:30, sometimes 6 now. And during that time, that's when I'm constantly reevaluating what is a glass ball and what's a rubber ball, and what is it that I need to make sure that I'm prioritizing for this upcoming week. And then every day I reevaluate, did I make those right decisions? And so that is my awareness. Every day, every morning is my awareness. And I know my action at the end of the week that I want. And that brings me so much clarity. I know what I want. I know what I have. And your career as a sports PT, this is where you're going to get stuck. This is where you're going to get stuck, constantly accepting things, taking on loads of projects, overwhelming yourself, being overwhelmed with simultaneous work and trying to develop everything at the same time. And it's not about that. It's about, yeah, you can juggle everything. It's just figuring out which one is a rubber and which one is glass, and constantly going through that path and being like, all right, I'm not dropping this. It's year 2, year 3, I'm still going. And all your peers, everybody that sees you just becomes, they admire it. They're like, how are you doing this? What are you doing? What's so different? And honestly, it's not the podcast you're listening to. It's not the exercise progression that you're doing. It's just bringing you clarity on what you're good at, what you're not, what you need to do, setting that path for yourself. And so ultimately, that's where PTs, I wanted to share where sports PTs get stuck. And I think that you need to really figure out and prioritize your week, your quarter, your year. Like I said, I do mine every Saturday morning at 5, and then on Sunday night I reevaluate. And is this the plan for the end of the week that I need to get accomplished? I want all these notes done. I want all this stuff done. I have these interviews. I've got these progressions. I got this strength programs that I'm working on. If I can figure that out, I'm just constantly prioritizing. You'll never get it dialed in 100%, but you will be in that 99% bracket if you're constantly doing this. I would say highly recommend, and you need to do this, schedule it out. Pick one time in the week that you're doing this and you're committing to it. Honestly, 20, 30 minutes. I do it for the full hour just because that's my sauna session, but ultimately it's my hour to reflect and what are my priorities? What am I doing? Bring a piece of paper, do whatever it is that you need to do. It's your iPhone or your Google Notes or sheet or Docs or whatever it is. And at that point, you can kind of work through that and then have it publicly or like have it somewhere where you can easily access. And that is your thing. You got to prioritize. So schedule it out. And if you need help with scheduling, I'll share this on a different podcast. There's something called an Eisenhower matrix. That's what I personally use to be able to go through and figure out what's important and what's a glass ball and what's not. That'll give you more opportunities to figure out what is the priority for the week. So I'll go over that on a different podcast because that is really about figuring out and triaging what's important in your career. And I'll do that in a different episode. But look that up, Eisenhower matrix. That's what I use. That's what my staff uses now that we've been getting into. So there you have it. And for those of you who are working through the glass ball and rubber ball, for those of you who are considering the development of acute injury management, go for it. Those of you going manual therapy, go for it. If you're doing exercise progression, go for it. For those of you who are looking at your priority is you've been wanting to get to strength and conditioning. This is the place where you've been putting it off. You can do the manual therapy, you can do the exercise, and you're like, man, I just want to work on strength and conditioning. I feel like I'm missing something. I can take that ACL athlete further. I can take the baseball player better. I can create the program. I can get them into strength and conditioning. I can get them into wellness programs. I just don't know how to do it. That's simple. One of the things, the best thing you can do is join me at my strength and conditioning summit. It's specifically for sports PTs. I'll take the CSCS. I'll break it down and make it easier for you to understand. I'll give you what it is that I work on to create a strength program just from the initial evaluation, whether it's a post-operative, non-operative, at session number 1, how to help you organize and figure out what's a glass ball and what's a rubber ball within strength conditioning. What are the priorities? I'll tell you what, and it's not the exercise progression. It's the last thing I'll do. One of the glass balls is figuring out what people's wants and needs are, and I'll go through the whole checklist to make sure that you can build a program from scratch and you can help people get into wellness programs in your clinic, whether you're a director or you're trying to help your clinic grow, or you run a cash-based company, or you're in professional sports and you want to work with strength conditioning coaches a little closer. This course is going to be perfect for you. It's a 2-day CEU course. It's one of my mentorship courses that I host. It's part of the series. It's June 10th and 11th of 2023. It's virtual. I am taking a couple seats in person. I think we maxed it out at 5 more available seats, only because I'm trying to tailor this to everybody virtually so that way you can have a really good experience. It gives you an opportunity to learn what's like to develop programs in professional sports, what's working, what's supported by literature, and what is practical inside the clinic, so that way you don't have to overthink this and be overwhelmed by more fire hose activity, but so you can simplify your world and give you clarity into action of designing home exercise programs and strength and conditioning programs. So there you have it. If that's something for you, it's on drchrisgarcia.com/summit. It's on my website. It's on my Instagram, Chris Garcia DPT. Nonetheless, I hope you guys are doing amazing. I'd love to see you inside the course. If not, better triage, figure out what it is that you need to bring awareness in your career so you're not like one of the failed sports PTs that you may or may not know. You don't want to be stuck like them. You don't want to be in a position where you become complacent. And this is where it starts. Awareness leads to clarity. Clarity leads to action. Crush it. Work on your Eisenhower matrix. Work on your glass rubber balls. Ultimately, figuring out what it is that you want in your professional career. That's what it's all about. So, hope that helps. Hope you guys are doing well this week, and I will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.